Welcome back. Today we're going to take a look at the CCA CA2. The CA2 was kind of a sleeper set, right? It got released kind of in the middle of other budget sets. No one really noticed it too much. The MT1 kind of got most of the praise, but CA2 is kind of out there doing its thing. So the Fadai store on Amazon reached out to me and said, "Hey, you want to review it?" I'm like, "Sure. How bad can it be? It's a single DD. I like single DDs. It's affordable. People want to know what it's about." So I said, "Sure." So I do want to thank them. Fadai store on Amazon US. It's about $15.99 there. This is the yellow version, and it's quite nice. It's definitely reminiscent of the MT1, which took a lot of people's attention at the time this one was finally released. But so these are KZ flip tips, so a little wider bore. These have tons of bass, so there's not much point in using regular star tips or the tips that came with it because they're kind of so-so. CCA tips are never really my favorite, but definitely kind of a nice clear set. This is not the stock cable. This is nice HDK's GoldenFall. So that is a $100 cable on a $15.99 pair of IEMs, but these are worthy of it. This is a really nice set. I have no issues with putting this cable on this set. So the stock cable is pretty much a standard KZ dark copper set. Little QDC connectors, 90-degree connector, pretty much standard stock cable. Packaging is pretty much the stock budget set from both CCA, KZ, TRN. They all tend to use the same packaging. So let's kind of jump into it. So CCA2 didn't really get too much notice, but it is 100% fun. Unapologetic V-shape. It's got a really big V-shape, which we'll get to in a minute. If KZ made a single DD, I would have called it the CA2 and not the EDX. If you were blindfold someone and say which one is the KZ, which one's the CA2, this is another set where you'd almost guarantee pick the opposite brands from what they sound like. Because whereas the EDX was a little more controlled, a little more restrained, a little more clarity focused, this is unapologetic V-shape. It's got like a big V-shape, almost like a ZSTX or the ZST. One of my favorite KZ sounds, or that signature is one of my favorites because it's just absolutely, big bass, big treble, sounds great on dance music, super high energy, super engaging, super fun. That's exactly what the CA2 is. So, like I said, closer to the ZST or ZSTX, very GIF friendly. Everything sounds reasonably good. You're not going to get someone who say, "Oh, I can't hear the vocals because it sounds like the guy's in a tunnel." Everything is forward. Everything is pretty much in your face. So graph-wise, what does it look like? So like I talked about, the MT1 bass-wise was actually pretty good. It's actually a bassy set, but it's about down here in the red. CA2 is up here in the blue. EDX was down here with the MT1 bass-wise at that level too. So you can see the CA2 has quite a bit in the low end, and then it sort of follows the same pattern. And then as you get into the upper, lower treble, upper mids, same idea. It's a big V shape. So the blue is the CA2, and it's actually higher than the other two. And then it takes the same kind of dip there. So you can kind of get the idea. It's more and more bass, a little more treble. It's what KZ sort of made their money on. That was the foundation of KZ, big V shapes, and this is no different. This sounds like, pretty much sounds like a ZSTX, even a Z1 to me. It's in that same ballpark, just probably not as aggressive as the ZSTX, but definitely just as much fun. So sound-wise, big bass, big treble, forward vocals, perfect for pop dance music at the gym. Acoustic, quieter vocals, I'd probably not go with the CA2. It does those quite well, but this is a high energy set, and it really caters towards that big V shape as opposed to kind of a quieter vocal, which sounds okay, but not what shines on this guy. So the bass boosted, it'll definitely rumble when it has to, but it's not overdone. If you think that bass level If you were going to call this bass level overdone, it doesn't go overdone is how I would put it. It doesn't get super boomy. It doesn't really, it's controlled boom. It never really overruns the mids. It never really takes over. So quite nice, still controlled, but plenty of boom. And it's definitely more fun than textured. Quick and controlled enough to not overpower any of the other sounds in the track. So I think they actually pulled that one off pretty good. If you're looking for tighter, faster texture, that's not what, you'd almost say that's not what KZ is known for, but in this particular set, that's not what it's really about. So the Cure love song, the drum, and you could hear it right in that bass drum right in the beginning. It sort of lacks that quickness and definition and texture. It sounds fun, but it doesn't have those sharp edges. It's really hard to tell when the drums stop. So not quite as much detail as there should be, but the level is really good and it's not boomy. It doesn't knock out the vocals. But what you really notice in that song after the drums is that layering and separation right after the vocals start, because there's a lot of height to Robert Smith's vocals, and then the guitars and the drums, and then the lower bass all underneath. It all stacks quite nicely vertically, and it's something that you don't find too often in an under $20 set, but it's a recurring theme through that we'll talk about, is all this layering separation actually enhances what's already a pretty solid signature, but it just sounds a lot better. So the mids in isolation, not as energetic compared to the bass and the treble. The vocals alone are pretty nice and they're full, and male vocals don't sound thin at all. Even with big wide bore tips like this, there's still plenty of bass, plenty of body in male vocals, plenty of richness. I don't really have any complaints there, but I wouldn't necessarily buy the set just for vocals if that's your thing. It's really set up for the big V, so big bass and big treble. So the mids, pretty good, but there's probably other sets. I think the MT1 is pretty good if you EQ that one just for vocals alone, whereas this one you're definitely looking for a more high energy genre to pair it with. But considering the bass level, still nice clarity and detail, and I think out of the box the vocals for me were better than the MT1. I wasn't a huge MT1 fan, so don't read too much into that, but I ended up playing EQ games with the MT1 to get it kind of to the point where there was really enough detail and clarity in the vocals, and this one with this kind of boosted upper mid, that's not a problem because everything is kind of sharp and detailed. So little mix, no more sad songs. Right in the beginning, those forward breathy female vocals come through very forward, right there where they should be, and then the synth kicks in, and then at 30 seconds that beat kicks in, and then now you're hearing V-shape, right? Big upper range hitting your ear, vocals, all that sounds good. And then at 48 seconds, even more of it comes together. Big, powerful, uplifting. This is very much a gym set that'll raise your energy level. And then if you stick with it to 224, you MGK fans will hear his voice. And again, this lower rich male vocal, detailed. There's no thinning of male vocals. They're not overly thick. It actually done is quite right. So really nice track. Like I said, not one I would pick for mids, but it actually does mids quite well, especially when you combine it with big bass and big treble. So the treble is kind of one of my, I'm not going to say favorite, but this KZ style treble, which is very boosted, very energetic. It feels great with EDM and dance music. Synths and electronics sound much better than acoustics. If you're looking for perfect cymbals, something that's so boosted, probably not going to be your favorite set. But for electronics, it sounds amazing. It's very uplifting and engaging and very powerful is how I would say it. So better than budget KZ BAs. You don't have that metallic since it's a DD. But it is boosted quite a bit, and it's going to kind of take you off that natural path if that's what you're into. So two, dancey tracks, Wild Sun, Armin van Buuren, the club mix. This drop from 2 to 3 minutes. It's just big beats, big synths, and that's exactly what this set does exactly very well. Same thing, Deadmau5, bridged by a light wave, that radio edit, that 1 minute to 2 minute whole section. Very much layered top to bottom. So the vocals are way above, her vocals are right nicely above the synths right there at the wide. It's actually quite wide too. And then all that bass and that beat is all there down at the bottom, and it's very strong and powerful, just as it should be. So that those synths are almost tickling your ears, and then you feel kind of that rumble of the beat and the drums and the bass down there. So yeah, I think these two songs kind of sum up this one quite nicely. And like I said, the stage, very good height and width for a sub 20 set. It scales quite well with a better source. Maybe it's just GoldenFall. We'll never know, but it definitely pairs well with better sources. And you get more of this staging and separation. It all sounds a little better on better sources. And most sets have that, but this one, I would actually put it in the KS1 range of it sounds quite a bit better on a better source. So it really enhances all that separation and imaging and layering when there's enough space. And this one gives you plenty of space, so it's actually quite nice. And I think it's one of the bigger differences with the MT1. The MT1 was kind of forgettable for me, and this one really stood out. So I will definitely take, even though they graph alike, I mean, they graph almost super similar, except for the bass, right? The MT1 is down here and the CA2, but the rest of it is pretty dead on close to the CA2, but I would take the CA2 in a minute any day of the week over the MT1. So again, thank you guys for tuning in, and I will see you next time.